Good morning. Welcome to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Took a little break, a hiatus from not recording live here for everyone. We're back, and we're back in this live events again. Welcome back, everyone.
Happy Tuesday, gentlemen.
It is a Tuesday.
It feels good.
Feels good to be back, especially after this last week. Not so much fun. How was your trip, Tommy? Did you have a good time?
I did. We did the aquarium. My daughter touched the dolphin. It was as Florida as you can imagine, kind of thing.
There you go.
I rode an alligator. No, just kidding. But
isn't that your taxi when you come out of the airport? They just line them up there and you just ride them.
Yeah, they don't have Ubers. Yeah, it's amazing. The beach, the pool, the whole thing. The 2 T-shirts when you have to travel. Like if you have to go from anywhere to anywhere else, you have to bring 2 T-shirts, one for the drive and the other for where you're actually going, because it's just so hot.
It is hot.
One thing I greatly miss from Florida, though, I don't know if anyone on the podcast knows of a place called Publix. You ever heard of it?
I do know it very well.
Yeah, man, their subs, I miss that.
Really?
That's my one regret moving is those Publix subs.
No kidding.
Yeah,
the Publix sub.
Yes.
Who knew? That's a tidbit of information right there
telling you,
for all you Floridians. If you're visiting Florida, hit Publix and
hit.
Isn't that a grocery store?
Southeast, yeah, it's a grocery store. Yeah, but I think they cater to a lot of Northeasterners. I think because they have a lot of they brought a lot of stuff down. But I think they're all the way in Alabama. It's to the Southeast. So if you find a Publix, go get a sub.
I never would have guessed the subs were what you like so much.
I mean,
Tommy likes the
right
subs.
In my wheelhouse, so
excellent.
I was a big fan of the sub back in the day when I could eat subs from Subway. Tolerance. Dang you.
There's I'm going to transition away from subs, as interesting as that is. Moving over to Power BI related things. There's a couple announcements going on in the blog since we've been kind of out here for a bit. I think the key one that I'm interested in talking about here just very briefly is there's some large announcements around, well, not very large, improvements, I would just say, maybe some improvements around data mart query editors. So the
quality of life is the way I like to call those things.
These are a lot of table stakes, I think, editors capabilities here. So you'll notice that there is now a new editor window. You can write your own SQL queries. And for those of you who don't know what a data mart is, seems like, again, we're still trying to figure it out ourselves, but it's like a SQL server that is attached to all of your data sets. So you have full SQL writing capabilities. So you're able to write SQL statements. They have this concept of visual editor. So there's actually a kind of a nice, Power Query-esque type feeling editor in there. But you get multiple tabs. You have now saving queries, rename and deleting the queries that you're running. So I remember previously when they first came out, there was nothing like that. You weren't able to edit, save queries. You could write a query, and then as soon as you navigate away, it would disappear. So
it kind of dawns on me. I wonder if they knew that they were stepping into that crowd. And by that crowd, I mean, I'm part of that old SQL community.
Yeah.
Right. You just stuck an interface into Power BI that was SQL-like, man. And I would imagine the requests for enhancements are miles long. Be like, yeah, your query editor doesn't do this. If it doesn't do this, then I'm not going to use it because I'm going to go to SSMS. Or you've forced me to use Azure Data Studio, right? Which is kind of painful if you've used the two. It doesn't compare in terms of the features, the quick keys, all the things that you can do in SSMS. So I'm kind of chuckling in my head now as data marts is stepping into that realm. But a lot of these are good, you can open multiple windows, you can save queries, change the query names, all that kind of stuff. It's good steps in the right direction.
Yes, Seth, that's a really good, I think, a topic in itself, because I don't know too if that was always their intention with the SQL part of this. Being able to do that. I don't know if that was from the origin, hey, we're going to eventually build this, or was it something that just it's morphing into that?
I think
So
it's mainly it's probably just because of familiarity, right? Like
yeah,
you have the same setup. They're probably using some of the same bits and pieces to make it look very
right.
similar. Um, but I'm half joking, right?
Well,
From the
no, yeah,
standpoint that
well,
it's like, you know, analysis, people who are analyzing using SQL on a regular basis, like you get used to your hotkeys, you get used to commenting and uncommenting, you get used to a lot of the features in there that make querying really easy.
Yep.
And when you don't have them, even Azure Data Studio, as an example, right, does
Yes.
not have some of those same
yeah,
quick, key, easy features, which is why I only use it periodically when I need to
right.
access stuff.
Well, I bet they
So,
were surprised. They probably built the data mart, it's like, and we'll do a SQL query, or you can do SQL in there too, whatever. And then they probably looked at the data like, wow, everybody's using this,
yeah.
because I find myself using it a lot just to do some simple polls.
Yeah. Well, I mean, corollary, right? Like much like Power BI is getting integrated into everything,
Hmm.
it's kind of cool. SQL now has another place to sit in another area where um, you're just opening that avenue for people to access data,
Yeah.
which is good.
I think this also fits very well with their story of like low code to no code
Hmm.
solutions, right? So this is more that low code. I mean, I don't think the intent here is you're supposed to write in massively complicated views or things that are happening in here. It's here's a little bit of here's the graphical interface, right?
Yeah.
Here's the grab the different elements from the left hand side and apply some transformations. Oh, and by the way, here's some SQL behind the scenes that lets you see how it's written. So it's kind of like exposing that code that is being used on the server to generate these queries. I like it. I think it's a move in the right direction. You can definitely see they're rounding out the product to make it easier to use and consume. And again, it feels very much like what you would see in a lot of it's all Power BI esque, right? The tabs are the same. I do like the fact that they have added the left hand nav, so the objects are on the left hand side.
Hmm.
In Power BI desktop, all the objects for visuals, properties, everything's on the right. And so I find it interesting that they've gone back to the left hand nav here for this thing. It almost feels like it would have been more Power BI to put it on the right hand side. Anyways, good blog article. I'll put that out here in the chat window just in case you want to read up on it a little bit more about the announcement. And I'd also be remiss if we go back to the blog. There's a couple other brief announcements, but there's a blog post out about the first ever Microsoft Power Platform Conference was just announced. So we've been saying for a while this conference is out, and there's also we've been promoting it, and I think it'll be a good event for people. We also have some promotion codes to go with it. So I'll put those in the description of the YouTube video. So if you want a promotion code, you can get, I think it's $50 off if you use our promotion code for the Power Platform Conference on September, see if I get it right, 20th and 21st. Yeah, they're saying it's the 18th to the 23rd, so there must be some pre-cons in there as well. But anyways, September 18th to the 23rd, you can go get some learning, training, information about what the Power Platform's doing. Excellent. Anything else? Any other kind of hot topics we should talk about before we jump into our topics today?
Yeah, for the public, if you ever wanted to meet Microsoft folks that are in charge of different areas within the Power Platform, that's a great conference to go to. I mean, it looks like a full 80% of it is all going to be Microsoft presenters and speakers. So um, definitely worth checking out. That we should drop the link in there for the new Power Platform conference. Looks like a new partnership that they might have connected with a different company to generate one, but looks interesting for sure.
Drop the link and the promotion code. It's also in the chat window as well, so that should be there if you want to check it out. Excellent. All right, with that, today's topic, field parameters. All right, Tommy. Well, I guess I'm the switch statement too. Kick us off, Tommy. Give us some context here. What are we talking about today?
It's a great way to put it. First, I'm just so excited to talk to you guys again and argue. So I'm really excited about this topic because back in the day, if you wanted to do dynamic things, let's say in Power BI, like, I have a lot of measures, but I don't know how to display it all on one page. There's a switch statement. It's like, hey, look, I have a filter, but it also acts as showing different, metric at a time. Well, field parameters came out, I believe, I'm going to say the May update, and it changed the game, right? Because not only could you do I want to show a different metric based on a selection, but you could actually do that based on a field. So if I said I want to
Hmm?
show the product or the salesperson or the country, I can easily change multiple visuals or one visual all based on a field parameter. So this, I think when this came out, we all said, this is incredible. This is amazing. This can take a lot of the places of the switch, but it can also take a lot of places of calculation groups too in its ability. That being said, and again, why we're not just going to be singing the praises of it, right? I think there's also been discussions too. When it came out, everyone was showcasing what they did, but how important is it? Where does it really play? Because I've used it a few times, but then other times I've taken it away and did something else with it because it didn't serve its purpose. So I think today is really talking about what it is, where does it play in our reports, and like where do we think it plays and where should it play?
Hmm? I like this topic. I think this is I've been using this more and more recently. And again, I'm following pretty much what a lot of the common practices where people are using. Right, I have a couple measures. I click that, I go through the field parameters window. I like the fact that it gives you a nice little dialog box, lets you kind of pick a couple things,
Mm.
put some things together, and it just kind of works. I think I guess what I would say that kind of tripped me up initially was, even though you're making a new reference table, essentially, it makes a new table for you when you use this. After you make the reference table, it looks like what it appears to be like a column, and you have to kind of drag that column into the visual, and you're like, oh, interesting. It just kind of works.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how it's actually able to take, again, my example here, I have numbers of measures, and I'm trying to use one or a group of those measures. I want someone to select something, pick this or pick that, or something along those lines. Um, you know, pick sum of sales or sum of units, right? So once you add those two to the field parameter selection, you could add that to your visual, and you could make a matrix that would have both of those applied, or you could just make people select a single data point. Pick one or the other. But I think it has a default value when you use it.
Right.
Yeah.
So just a little. Oh, go ahead.
The question I have is, before we dive into use cases and things around field parameters, like, how would you have done some of the things that field parameters allows us to do in the past before them?
Question.
I think
Like
the
just on
first,
a high
yeah,
level,
yeah.
walk the audience through the steps of, like, kind of what you would have to do if you didn't have field parameters as of May.
Back when I used to put Publix bags on my
Back.
shoes when it snowed, walked backwards up a giant hill to go to school.
Yeah.
Back in my, I mean, I remember the first time I played with Switch, read an article, and it's like, oh wow, there's just a need to show, like high level for the visual to showcase a certain metric. So we were able to play with filters and use a switch to create a measure that basically showed, hey, sales, units, like total members, and being able to show that dynamically in multiple visuals based on a user selection. I mean, from that moment to even today, it's still being used in some of our more important reports, or some of the more important reports that I've built, just because it's so integral that it can change not just, in a sense, one measure, but everything that's dependent on it. And that's what I would do for the metrics. That it was building what metrics did I need, building the switch statement, and really building that uh, separate table or the disconnected table
Mhm.
for fields. Now, for fields, there was no really easy way. There's some playing with calculation groups, but not really. I mean, to try to finagle things, but you're kind of stuck with that. Really, it was bookmarks. If I needed to show different categories, you would create a bookmark, hide a few different tables to showcase the different fields to a user. It could have acted like a field parameter, but it was a lot of technical a lot of jargon that was happening in the background.
And the thing, that's a good explanation, right? Like, separate table,
Hmm?
multiple different measures, references,
Mhm.
switch statements, bookmarks. Like, when you say bookmark on anything, right?
Yeah.
Multiple objects on the page, like interactions between all of those objects. Throw it like, so we're painting this picture of complexity, right? So the capability was there, right? But field parameters is, I think, what's most interesting or amazing to me, and why I think it's such a great feature, is it's one of those that just cuts out that whole swath of like
Mhm.
really labor intensive work to get something to do what you wanted to on a
Right.
page, right? And that's where I think some of uh, the interest this crosses over into that interesting topic for Power BI developers that get really frustrated talking to business or IT because they go, "Oh, well, on this report you did this. Can you do that?" And, "Oh, I need it this afternoon." It's like, "Hmm, buddy," right? Like, I can't do that.
Do
This
you
is why,
really
like,
need it?
ri- right, like hours of work behind just a simple object that goes lets you select between multiple different things, right? And this is where I love to see the investments from Microsoft in areas where the capability was there, but it took you an hour or more to go build that capability. And now they've made a way in which it's very straightforward and produces kind of a combo of different use cases in a single dialogue. And it's a huge time saver.
Yeah.
Huge time saver.
So there's a really good article on just this whole topic in general, field parameters in Power BI, how they're working. I have it up here. I'll put it in. It's from SQL BI. Those guys are amazing. Excellent article. Putting the article in the chat window here as well. And it goes a lot more in detail as to what's happening inside the field parameters and what it's doing, how it's
Hmm.
uh, executing queries against the data set. And one of the things I found in this particular article that I found very interesting was, well, and I'll be very clear here, right? A switch statement that Tommy was talking about earlier and is part of the model. That is a model level statement. And so if you use a switch statement, you could potentially reuse that switch statement as well on an Excel report, analyze in Excel. It's an element that you build. It's an internal table that you can use. The interesting part that's called out here in the article from SQL BI is the idea that the field parameters are purely a tool or purely a feature of Power BI Desktop. That is a Power BI Desktop only feature. So any third-party tool that would connect to these data models will not be able to use this feature, which is quite interesting.
It's closer to a bookmark than it is to DAX.
Yes, it is.
Right.
Yes.
Even though there is DAX.
Even though it's doing some DAX to write it, it
Right.
does generate a separate table. So there is a table that's being generated that is a part of the model. But even I found another very interesting point here that was very relevant here is if you're using, again, a field parameter to select various columns, there's actually two queries that are being run against the visual. So the visual has to first initially query what are the column, like if you pick 4 columns in the example they give here that you're talking about, like a very generic model, brand, category, color, continent, and country are the data model elements that they're using. Based on those elements, okay, if you pick 2 of those items, what does it do? How are the queries working?
Right.
And so it was very interesting to read the article around, well, actually, your visual is running 2 queries. One to request the list of columns first. Then once it has the list of columns it's going to be using, then it uses those columns in the second query to go back to the data model to return DAX from it,
Yeah.
which I found very interesting.
Well, and that makes sense, right? Because
It
I don't know if
does.
you've tried this yet, because calculation groups, if you add a calculation group to that model,
Mhm.
this doesn't work anymore.
Yes.
Because, or for at least for the metric side, because you can't add an implicit measure
No implicit
to
measure.
your, right. So, and I remember the first time I tried it, like, well, I guess I'm not doing like one, I have to choose one or the other.
Yeah.
But because it's not part of the model. So it's very, that wouldn't be my intuitive thought, right? That this isn't part of the model, like that this is more like a bookmark than it is actually like DAX statement or a script.
Yeah, I guess when I saw the feature, I was thinking immediately, well, hey, this is part of the model. Like I could use it anywhere. And I think
Right.
the realization that this is a visual level feature that is just for visual building it's good to know that. So,
Right.
would I use field parameters in a model that might be used in analyze in Excel? Might be something you want to consider. Might be, does that make sense for you? Maybe instead, what you'd want to do is a switch statement. That would be, again, a bit more code, but now is physically a part of the data model, and you could reuse that in other tools, third-party tools. But anyway, so I just find I find this interesting that they're now adding, again, outside of bookmarks, right? This is like a very specific model helper to make it easier for users to pick
Right.
things, which I think is very
And
relevant.
yeah, and the other side of the coin too, it's more complex than you think. So I don't have all the articles in front of me, but there's probably about 10 articles, and let's say out of those 5 that go into some very complex situations that you wouldn't think you could do with field parameters. Because I think on the surface, it's choose a metric, choose a field, showcase the visual.
Yes.
Well, and I think we'll get into this too, but as you use it, you start to think of, well, what if I could do this? And I think dependencies, right? So someone
Hmm.
actually, I think, showed currency based on a field parameter, based on another field parameter. And like I said, I'll make sure that's in the podcast episode. And I think it's going to be our next user group on something with field parameters, or definitely something we need to do. But
Yeah.
there is a whole other layer here, because that to me kind of goes into the segue, or at least field parameters are great. But I don't know about you guys, but it's not being used as much as I thought in my reports.
I wanna pause for a
Okay.
second on something you just kind of went through quickly, which is an implementation of field parameters.
Mhm.
One of the things that strikes me as interesting is as you develop one of these use cases or scenarios, it it's do you guys feel a need that we have to start naming things slightly differently so that you understand when a field parameter is used and the behaviors on different objects on a page versus um, the way a bookmark would interact? Or like I was looking, watching as you develop a field parameter, and especially with some of these, the basic use case of like I have a slicer, I'm selecting between two different things, and it's changing how um, the visuals interact on the page. How do you triage a problem if you don't even know what field parameters are,
Yeah, right.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And I was trying to like walk my way back. Like if I didn't know anything about how somebody developed a report page, would I be able to figure out that this is a field parameter quickly? And I suppose to some degree you would, right? Because you'd click on the slicer, you'd see that it's part of the calculated table in some of those field names. You'd see that there are references and filters, but it just adds to the, I think, challenge for Power BI developers to absolutely know that this new feature is here, um, because the interactions of how things go on a page are no longer driven just by bookmarks or um, I suppose the manual way of doing it, but you have those at least three dependent ways or
Yeah.
independent ways that you could have have things on a page behaving differently because of the way it was implemented.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be something that, again, getting more comfortable with what that is doing. So you asked the question around, could I easily detect it? Right. I think I know, because I've written a couple of them or used them a couple of times, what the pattern of that looks like. But I think you're right, Seth. I think it'd be a very good idea. Again, I'm a big proponent of going to the data model and describing tables and having descriptions on them. So, I'm already thinking some best practices. Maybe not the name of the table is adjusted. Maybe because I feel like when I'm naming the tables using field parameters, I'm trying to use a name that makes sense in the
Yeah.
context of the report. So I'm not going to probably say field parameter of and then kind of write out the name there, because I want whatever I'm writing the name of the column or the table name, I want it to kind of match what I'm putting on the report page, because by default, if I just have the column called parameter, right, or whatever that is at the default value, when you drop it on a slicer, boom, there it is. That's the thing that you get on the report page. So um, I do like that part of it. On the other hand, though, I don't like I don't like the icon. I feel like the icon should be slightly different. I know it's a calculated table. I feel like their icon should be just a little bit different to be a bit more, you know, direct about what's going on there. I think that would be a good idea.
Out of all the things you were going to say I don't like, icon was not in my top 5.
Not in your
So
top five or on your top five.
no, not, I mean, that wasn't one of the things I thought you were going to go. The thing that I really have an issue with.
Well, you've known
Well,
I've
I
had
gotta
issues with
look.
this for a while. Like all the things that are like in the field parameter window and how
Right.
different the experience is across. It's so confusing for people working in desktop across different field
So
parameters options.
here's another question that comes from Power BI guy right in the chat. He says, I think they're excellent for newer users or when you just want to do something quickly. They're like a gateway drug for more advanced features. Do you guys agree with that?
You know what? I think that's a great question, because I was going to ask something at least related where
Well,
there's
he beat
two.
you to it.
I know he did, and which is great. He's a smarter guy than I
Okay.
am. But there's two predicaments I think that come up when you create your field parameters. Like again, someone introduces this, you're like, this is amazing, but then you start to think about like it's very linear in terms of for someone who's, let's say, more advanced, where you can only do exactly that. Like you can only choose these fields. Well, what if you want to create another, another group? Well, you can't. You have to create another field parameter.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like that first predicament for a new user. It can be, it works when it's basic, right? It's like, I need product, subcategory, and product SKU,
Mhm.
right? Great, easy, done. But I think a lot of situations we're not necessarily dealing with that, or it's the other predicament in itself is where does that go on the report page? If you have 4 visuals that are all static in terms of the metric that they're showing, and then you have this one that just does a bunch of funky things, does that make sense for a user? I don't know. So if you had one report page that just did everything based on the field parameter, fine, but is that a good report? So I kind of feel, I think I do agree with him for a new user. Oh man, this solves a lot of problems. But and for a new consumer, easy if you make it basic.
Mm-hmm.
But that being
It-
said, yeah.
So what are some use cases that you come to top of mind that field parameters don't support? And when you're trying to do some of the interactive or pick and choose different measures that show up on report objects.
I think the number one is I don't want to say correlation, but it's context. I think number one, it's the context where I'm running into the problem where I create a field parameter for certain fields, but then you put that on the report page, like, well, I want to see that field and this field based on that metric. Well, there's no way in a sense to combine those two or the comparison because it's showing you one metric, one report, let's say. And the same with the metrics too, where if I want to create a field parameter based on product, I have to create a whole, the whole field parameter, but that's not correlated to, let's say you also had stuff on customer, geographic information, customer type or customer level, etc. There's no context in between where they're going to be two separate field parameters. You have to create two filters now, right, on the report page to do this. And there's a lot of clutter. So it's that ability to compare where I'm having the largest issue. If I want to show one metric, one field, I'm good.
I think there's also the scenario, and one of the things I think I've struggled with the most was, it's changing the categorical values on an axis of a chart. I think where this is potentially the larger problem, right? Let's say I have just, again, I'm using the standard data model that kind of comes with Power BI desktop, the Excel file that comes with it, right? I have like products, I have countries, I have categories, and maybe the measure is the same across all those, right? If I'm trying to switch between different
Mhm.
things, I think before I was previously solving that with either like a hierarchy. You could put a hierarchy in there. You could drill to the next layer.
Mm,
So you could change the axis that
right.
way. But again, very undiscoverable to the end user. You have to kind of like teach them, okay, here's a chart with a hierarchy in it that will change the context of those things. And sometimes, if you're using the let me call you out the right features here. There is trying to use it. I have a visual up here that's has it in there. Come on, hover tooltip. Why is it not hovering? It has the expand down one level, which is the arrow that splits into two. And when you split into two, it gives you like the existing hierarchy level and the next one down below it. So you can get into weird use cases if you don't turn off the icons correctly, that you're giving someone like data that may not make sense, right? It may not make sense
Yeah.
to break country by product category. That may not be what you're looking for. But anyways, that was one way to do it. The other way was if you had like a bar chart or something like that, you could do like a button, right? You'd have the button that would say show the bar chart or show it as this thing or show categories. So you could make two distinct visuals and then kind of hide one and show one behind the scenes. So that's just a lot of work, and the maintenance of that is kind of a pain. So I think to the Power BI guys comment here about why is this a good solution, I definitely think this is for the beginner user, right? This is definitely for beginner users who are like just trying to get into this thing. If they learn how to build a field parameter, they can quickly switch between 3 or 4 or 5 categorical values on an access of a toolbar. Easy peasy, no problem. So yeah, that sounds like where I see the most use cases. And I find that's, again, it's easier now. I like the fact that there's a navigation menu to get it started. Couple clicks, boom, 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 done, and it works. So that part I think I like more about it.
At first, I didn't agree with it, but as you guys are describing more, I do, right? But I don't want to trivialize, and that's why I'm glad we spent some initial time here in it. I wouldn't even put like what field parameters solves wasn't a beginner feature,
Yeah.
right? Or functionality,
Yes.
right? They wouldn't even been able to develop the solution that field parameters now gives them.
Correct.
And to say, oh, this is now a beginner feature, right? That's where I'm like, there's a lot of value that's unpacked underneath field parameters
Yes.
that it gives developers in general. Can we always take it to the more advanced level?
Of
Yes,
course, we
right?
will, and we will.
But I think,
yes.
but what I like about this is, okay, I agree. You can always go with more advanced, but I wouldn't say field parameters is like, oh, it's for the beginner user. It is now, but it never was before, right? And I think that's where the simplification of some of this and the time invested in it is where you're increasing the value of Power BI for a wider audience to get more out of it that they weren't capable to do before, which is, I think, the cool part.
I would say I would say this fits very much. I think in general, if I step back and say, okay, what are the broader trends that Microsoft is trying to do? Like, this is one of them, right? This is simplifying the user interface and getting in easily, solving some of these more painful issues, right? I think this is where we should be spending our time. I think this is a really good move from Microsoft's standpoint, is to continue simplifying and add some ease to make these more complex things, very basic.
So in terms of for not necessarily the building side of this, but the consumer side of this, where does this play in terms of, like I said, we'll say that my biggest struggle here has been very much with, you have some visuals that are static, you create, have the measure for it, but then you have this on the side grouped filter and one visual, just a single visual that does field parameters. To me, that hasn't worked out very well. Where as much as I want that to work, I feel like it's even confusing for me. It can do some things, but it's not. I don't see it as being super helpful. It's cool and it shows me some information, but it almost breaks the story, so to speak. So do you guys kind of understand that predicament, or have you guys dealt with that at all?
I haven't gone down that route that much yet.
Okay. So what roles is it playing? Like, what types of reports then where field parameters really shine then?
Again, I think it's one of those. It's kind of like those summary level reports. If I'm talking about a little bit of self-discovery in there, right? We know there's requirements around, hey, I'm just trying to do some self-discovery, put a lot of data on the page, let me kind of pick and choose what I want. I think that's kind of where I'm seeing, where I feel like I'm using calculation groups. It's I'm not doing, if I'm doing a very catered design report, or if I'm doing a very specific, I'm not using them as much, right? Because it's a lot less around, it's that idea of, I need to pick one of 10 columns in a chart. Okay, I'm trying to give you a lot of features to go discover what data you want. I think you need 3 columns on this table, but you're saying you need all the columns. Okay, let me just put something together that's going to let you select which things I think you need, and just let you kind of pick and choose. So I think it's more of this self-discovery part of it, right? Just an analyst would use these things more so than I would be putting these things on like a, an executive or a higher end level report. Those things I would be catering the message a bit more, making sure it's a more specific. And then when we need more discovery, or people that are more, I'm just going to roll around the report and look for data, those are the kind of situations where I think I'm using them more.
So that's it. I'm glad you said that. One of the use cases, surprisingly, I've been really utilizing the field parameters has been in sandboxing.
Yep.
So
again, I don't know what I don't know. Like I'm doing a lot of like analyst discovery type. Like I don't really know exactly what I'm looking for, but I think I want a group of columns that kind of like this. So you just kind of pick a couple and then you kind of like can kind of click around quickly and easily. Oh, okay.
Right.
Because I really do like the feature of like, a horizontal slicer and then just kind of like tapping stuff very quickly, and it's like boom, 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 boom. It switches the visual fast.
So actually, for a client and internally, I'm using it not just for myself, but what I mean is for when we share it with the stakeholder, we show them what it is, and then we kind of let them play around with it with almost like letting them kind of choose and say, hey, here are the things that are available. What makes sense to you in the context, especially if it's a new data set or if it's discovered for us where, we don't know the context of what things go well together. So, and that's kind of,
hang on. You give them a report that allows them to pick and choose which columns they want, and then you dial it back to those columns.
We kind of, so we let them play around with
That's
it,
interesting.
and then they say, I really like seeing this and this. Since I've seen it now, I've seen it together. Because how many times have we said they don't know what they don't know? They think they know what they want, but until they see it, they don't know. Well, this is a great way for them to go, oh, I didn't know how important days to this with this metric is so integral when I see it with the in this context. We have that conversation, and then we, in a sense, then build that into the report, not as a field parameter.
So you're using it in ways in which potentially in the initial conversations they can't make up their mind around something, right? Or like there could be a couple different metrics that would potentially provide the value that they're looking for, but they just don't know because like so many of our users, I don't know. I just have to see it and I have to play with it. So this is a way for you to do that. That's an interesting use case. It's cool.
Think about when you were getting when you're getting married and you went to the caterer and and they brought out all the foods. No. Think of this is
okay.
Yeah. So before you went, hold on. You remember you went to a caterer, right? Someone's gonna,
somebody did,
and they brought out all little pieces of food because you didn't know they had 100 things on the menu, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know I like the cheese sticks. These are really good. Let's have that at the wedding." And it's kind of like that stage where they can kind of not that they're picking and choosing, but as they can look at it, then you can have that conversation with them on these things are really important together. I like seeing this. I don't care about this, and that helps me. I mean, it's been something I've been utilizing more and more in not every development, but in more often than not, it's been part of the process.
I'm glad you went there. My mind went a different direction when
Food, always
when you
food.
started.
Remember,
Good. Food. It's food. Tasting the ingredients as
tasting the
you put them
ingredients,
together.
tasting the appetizers, the starters.
Good.
Yeah. So what about Switch then? I mean, in calculation groups, I think we had the conversation with Bernat, who just became a Microsoft MVP, which is super exciting. That's Bernat. Is super exciting. He did our I believe our May user group on calculation groups, and it was
amazing
phenomenal.
job. Very well done.
And which was perfect timing, field parameters. And we asked him point blank, does field parameters, make the calculation groups more obsolete? But I think this raises the questions with field parameters. Where do those two come to play, switch and calculation groups, now that we have this new feature?
So I want to point out another blog article. I think this one's actually on LinkedIn by Steven. I'm going to put this one in the article as well. So I want to point out, like, we've been talking kind of like how the basic implementation of how this would work. Steven does a really good job of articulating a whole lot more around how he would merge field parameters in cooperation with calculation groups. So you can kind of play them together. Very interesting use case. And if you think about it, it acts more like select anything you want on the visual, and the visual will kind of adjust everything, like changing the columns, changing the rows, switching the context of the rows to something else, changing the columns from sales, profit, and cost to like this year, last year, like really letting people kind of like very highly tune and adjust this. So let me say, I'm going to step back here, right? To set this up, I'm looking at this article and thought, this is really cool. This is a very interesting use case. I understand what's going on here, but if I'm going to ask like a beginner user to like show up and be like, hey, we're going to get down here and we're going to use calculation groups and we're going to write, I don't know, 50 lines of code to make it work. probably not what I'm expecting when we start presenting this with new users. So what I would say is this is one of these things where a simply new feature, and again, if you watch all the Microsoft demos, it's purely a pick these columns, select these things, watch the visual change. Like that's literally their demos on this stuff. They're not showing you any kind of like complex DAX things that Steven has put together. That being said, though, like I still think there's a place, and even if you read this article, in the middle of the article, when you're starting to use calculation groups, there's a switch statement inside the calculation groups that's being used with the field parameter. So to me, it's like it's just another tool inside the toolbox. I don't think I'm displacing something versus another tool. However, it's just another additional, ease of, implementation inside my report. And this is where I feel like I'm doing a lot more. This is where I think our jobs get a little more interesting now, because now we have to know all the things about like what are the pluses and minuses of field parameters, calculation groups, and now the switch statements. Which one is really what we're trying to do here, right? Like what's the best solution for the report? And I'm also thinking potentially here, I'm probably adding a bit more into the conversation around how will someone else maintain this, right? I can write it, I can make it work, but is this something that I'm expecting someone else to maintain? If the answer is yes, then maybe I'm going to start erring on the side of maybe we just simplify it a little bit more, right? Let's not go over the wall here, overly complex, unless it's a highly stylized report. Or again, we've had a lot of conversations around this previously, Tommy, around is the lemon worth the squeeze, right? Do I spend a ton of time making this amazing report with tons of complicated things in it, and it's like really, really well done?
Time thing, yeah.
And then, or do I just say, it's good enough. Let's just throw in some field parameters. It gets the job done. If you really, what you want is, I'll just drive you to another page and we'll put the information there. So this is where I'm like, I don't think I need to throw everything on one page. I'm probably balancing the pros and cons of, is this easy enough for me to maintain and give to somebody else? And does it meet the objectives of the report?
Greggy B makes some really good points in here in the chat, but ultimately, this isn't, and this is kind of the point I've been trying to make throughout, right? This isn't some brand new capability that didn't exist for us to be able to implement. But what it did is it lowered the bar for implementation so that you all of the sudden can open the function, open this capability to users that would never have touched it in the past. And then at the same time, it also makes it an ease of use improvement for advanced users, because you don't have to go through all of those steps all the time. You have other options, like you just pointed out with Steppen, is you can mix and match, right? There's other calculation groups can now be part of that solution. You can use field parameters with the things that you already know how to build, and it simplifies implementation for certain activities and actions you want to have on a page, right? So I think outside of maybe the new DAX measured name of that can be used within the field parameter, like there's nothing new that we weren't able to do before. It just took a long time to do, which meant you weren't implementing it, or you're trying to find other solutions, or you were steering away from it, because time is money, man. Right? Like you can't be doing that every single time. And now it's just a simplified version, and knowing that as part of your lexicon or library of knowledge is a powerful thing, because you can start to implement and use this shortcut when you're building more advanced solutions, or you just have the shortcut right out of the gate.
Well, to Mike's point, though, the other side of that coin, it's almost like the opposite of a gateway drug. Rather than leading you into this, if you don't have the knowledge of switch or calculation groups, you're almost like, well, this can do it almost as well. So why need to learn the other, like the complexity of calculation groups, right? Where you can almost say this suffices enough. And before, like, if you needed this feature before, you were forced to learn calculation groups. I'm not saying this is always the case, but it's almost a threat for, or it's a risk for a new user, where they can just easily just have the GUI field parameters and call it a day. But again, we've talked about the limitations there, where if you needed a little more a customization, so to speak, you need calculation groups,
Mhm.
or you need to use a switch, thing. But if this does it almost as well, that's the other side of that coin too.
But
So
I like what
yeah,
Greg is saying here, though. I think he's saying. I mean, I really liked his point was we're not adding capability. We're
right,
just giving you capability in a different way, slightly, right? So this is,
right,
but it also, I think, your latter point, Greg, is also very relevant here because we give you the easy button now. Do you shy away a little bit more from writing hard DAX in a switch statement? Probably to some degree. I'm not writing switch statements as much anymore, right? Now that I know that feature is so easy to
yeah,
implement, someone says, "Hey, I want to pick these couple columns." Yeah, no problem, got you covered. I know what the feature is. Boom, here it is. Simple, done. Move on. So I think in that respect, I'm using that feature a bit more, and I'm not avoiding it, but I don't go to it first now. I'm like, oh yeah, we should build a switch statement and a disassociated table. Like this, I'm gonna come back up really high here just for a second. I'm gonna say these are the kind of things that Microsoft should be providing to us, right? There's a menu, there's things that are
right,
automated. I click a couple buttons and stuff just builds itself into the model, right? There should be another dialog box that auto measures your model for you. Every column that has a number to it, it should take a best guess whether or not you're doing sums or averages, and it should just let you grab a bunch of fields all over the model and create like 10 measures at once. All the other external tools are doing this. Why isn't desktop making this stuff easier? So to me, this was like a feature very geared towards making the creature comforts inside desktop. I want to see more of these kind of things. Make more of the stuff that I do repetitively all the time, every single model.
Right.
Make that stuff go away. I want to make 6 measures at once and stick them in a folder. Do it. Make it happen. Make it so.
well,
Didn't they
so
absorb the creator of tabular model, right? Like, come on, I want to see some of those new things. And
yeah, right.
like, why don't we
Exactly.
work on
Well,
integrating tabular editor?
Well,
Exactly.
I'll say yes and no to your point, though, Mike. I think, yeah, there does need to be more user interface to be able to set things up.
Yes.
But in the conversation here, we're saying it's not adding a new feature; it's just an alternative. But once you do a field parameter, there's nothing else you can, in a sense, do to it. Like
Hmm.
what I would love is create a calculation group with the UE, but then I can still customize it as I need fit with the code, like Power Query.
Exactly.
There's user interface, but guess what? You can go into the code and edit.
But that's the
With
boon of this whole thing, right? Field
Sure,
parameters is a nice little navigated menu. Boom, boom, boom. Done. It works.
but you
On
can't
the
do
other
anything
hand,
else.
you can't even make a calculation group in desktop. So like you're automatically pushing
Well,
people into third-party tools
right.
immediately to get that stuff done. I
Yeah.
understand maybe why they're doing it, but again, to your point, right? Why are those things not being automated into the model as like easy buttons? Hey, we're going to help you build a calculation group. Here's a dialog box that helps you get started,
Right.
and then to your point, get it into the model, and then just make it work like a
Right.
switch statement, right? If you could achieve the same thing with a field parameter and a switch statement, why isn't there a dialog box around that?
Right. But it's rigid, and that's what I'm trying to say with field parameters. It's always going to take you from A to B the same route every time. There's no customization you can do, or
That's true.
it's much more complex. What I would want the ability is set me up with the drive, but then allow me to do further complexity with code, as a developer. So allow me to at least do the base, like, yeah, set up a calculation group for
Yes.
me in Power BI, but then still allow me to edit the calculation group. Like, I mean, a quick measure does that, right? Where
Mhm.
it sets you just do the things, but it still gives you the DAX that I can still edit as I need fit.
Correct. I can take out that stupid if error statement in there
Yeah,
and get rid of that. And
yeah,
I don't care if
yeah,
there's any errors. Just make it work.
yeah. I'll deal with it when I get
I'll
there.
deal with it when it breaks.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I think Greg's put it generates the code.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
that's what Power Query does. And that's what a lot of those easy features I want also, like, I think you need too. It
I agree.
generates code.
Yeah,
So
I mean, and even still, like this, the field parameters option, it does give you the starting code, so you can add more field parameters if you want
right,
in the future. You could definitely add more to it, or take away something you don't
right.
want. So I feel like that's a good start, and I just want to see
Yeah.
more of that across this auto generation of code across the model. Microsoft knows what best practices are. Microsoft understands what things are doing, what they're doing in here, and you know, there's a ton of opportunity to continue to add automation around making the model easier to consume and build. That's just what I'm pointing to.
I'd never thought about it that way, you know, Like that's I'm kind of having one of those mind melting moments here, right? If you think about Power Query and how it's been introduced to most people, it came with an interface to go build M,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And the last thing you see is advanced
Oh,
editor
by the
if you
way,
really want to.
here's the advanced
Right,
editor.
right.
No, I agree with you.
But like that's a really good point though, because it's been the exact opposite with DAX,
Hmm.
right? You can go type in your DAX expression, and now we're adding in like these pop-up windows that allow you to like do certain
Yep.
things that create objects within the model.
Yeah.
But at the same time, maybe what's needed is a singular interface where some of these capabilities are like lit up so that we can use them more efficiently,
Mm. Yeah.
because you're
Right.
generating DAX code. Like show the DAX code that's being generated along with it, and then for your advanced users, you could use that much more efficiently, because
I like that idea a
great,
lot.
great, I can click these 3 buttons.
Yeah.
It gives me the framework for what I need, and then I can go in and I can modify that code,
Yes.
and then click enter.
I like this idea a lot.
Implement.
Yes. I
Right?
feel like this is a lot of where I feel like we should, if you want more, so again, I'm trying to interpret a little bit here what Microsoft's going with this, right? Microsoft is a company that makes complex things simple, right? Power Query, complex. Writing M, not going to do it. Using a graphical interface that adds steps, that creates the M for me in an automated, great, love that. Works really well. That's like why I got hooked on Power BI to begin with. It was the whole Power Query M language data mashup engine. That was beautiful. Do that for more of DAX. It's the same thing. I don't want to write a bunch of code all the time. I don't want to type in sum every single time on every single column. Give me more graphical interfaces that just kind of like do things. Right? Right click on a column and say, make a measure that says sum. Boom, done. Created sum of, and gives me the measure name. Just give me more, shortcuts and things like that that go across the program. Make it easier for me to make the model quickly, right? Using best practices. Yeah, I like it a lot.
Do you know how much easier that would be if you just had a dialogue? They could just keep adding features to it, and it'd be part of the ribbon, as opposed to a new dialogue every single time.
This is where I think the big miss for quick measures was in my idea, quick measures was a big miss from Microsoft. Quick measures should have been this open community thing where you parameterize all the things and let people pick and choose what they want, and it just builds the DAX for you. That's kind of what I did in working with Dieter to make quick measures, or the quick measures tool. Same thing, right? I have a whole, like, we have dax.powerbi tips, which is a site generated for making the code to build a quick measure, basically. Like, here's a standard on how you would make a quick measure. Go use that, and then you can automatically add specific measures in a regulated way. That way you can pick the columns and fields and things you want from the model, pick these things, hit go, and now it just builds out some DAX for you inside the model, and you can go modify it later. Right. I would like to see more of that.
And circling back with the developer to learn, like, what do I need to know if you have this generated, and especially if new things are added to the ribbon? Well, like, all of us are curious, and if I see something new on the ribbon, I'm going, what does this do?
Mm-hmm.
And then again, you can see the DAX. You can begin to explore all the features, all the things, and again add to the tool belt, so to speak. But
I think the writing is on the wall here. It means seeing what data marts are doing and how they're producing like a data mart with a data set all together in the ecosystem. I feel like we're seeing the beginning of the reporting side and the modeling side starting to diverge slightly. I think we're getting to a place where you're going to start seeing more and more development from Microsoft in two separate spaces, right?
Yeah.
Working on the model, working on the report. And I still think desktop needs this ability to be able to like be in Power BI desktop and just publish the model. I don't feel like I need to publish I'm doing a lot of model and then report development. Why do I need to publish the thin report of the data model that I'm going to, like, why does there need to be a report page there? Just let me publish just the model.
Quick fun tidbit on that. I don't know if you guys ever, now we're going way off topic, but you ever rename the report but not the data model, and just to see what that does? It changes nothing. Or in terms of
rename the report, like, but not the data model
in the service. So you publish a report.
Yep.
and you rename the report, but not the data model.
Oh,
The
in the service, you
right,
rename it.
right.
Yes.
It's the first time you can rename the report to whatever you want. The
Yep.
data model stays the same.
Yeah, but what happens when you republish that thin report?
It adds a new data model.
What?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Are you sure about that? A thin report. Wait.
If you
No, you're saying
if I rename the report but not the data model, and then I change the name of the PBIX, it's going to add a data model, but with the same
with a different name.
So I got two reports. Let's say their name report A.
Okay. I'm losing you, Tommy.
I think we're done for today. So
maybe we walk through that use case next time.
So you go to a caterer, right? They have spanakopita. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Hold on.
This is really interesting use case.
We're at the very end of this thing. Tommy, finish the sucker out. Come on, give me the use case. Okay.
Report A is the PBX file you save.
Okay, so let me just clarify. Report A is model and report.
Model and report.
Okay, got it.
Because that's all I said. Yes.
Yep. Okay, just making sure I understand. Okay. Yep. Yeah.
Publish at the service.
Got it.
In the service, I changed the report, not
the data set. Correct.
I changed the report, the blue icon.
Yeah, the blue icon to something else. Okay.
To report B.
Yes. Then you republish report A from your desktop.
I republish report A.
Then what does it do?
No, I can do two things here. I'm going to change PBIX to report B now. So the PBIX, that original file.
Yep.
It's going to overwrite the report, and it's going to add another data. No, wait.
Does it do that? It just adds another. No. It adds another data set called report data set B.
Data set. Now, right?
Yeah.
And then it adds another report called report B. So now you have two report Bs in the service with the same name.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
the reason I'm asking that, the reason why I'm going down that nitty gritty thing, data sets and reports are named, and when they get published in the service, it's purely based on the connection strings.
Right.
Connection strings drive whether or not things are repeated or not. Nothing to do with the name. And it's so confusing. I 100% agree with you. You name something the same and you think, oh, I'll just overwrite it by renaming it and just publishing it. Doesn't work. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's all about the connection string.
It's annoying.
It's so annoying. Anyways. Okay, I just want to get to that answer. With that end of the day question, I think you've burned through a perfectly good hour with us. We appreciate your time today. Welcome back. We appreciate you being back live again. Thank you all very much in the chat for the great conversation and the thread that was going on there. For those of you who get up early, because this is not the most ideal time for our West Coast friends, thank you very much and appreciate everyone listening in today. Our only ask is, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you got a couple chuckles out of here or learned something new, please go ahead and share it with somebody else. Just let someone else know that you enjoyed the podcast and it's good content. We'd love to see it on, if social media, the account that you like. Give us your key points. Do you like field parameters? Do you use them? Comment and share the YouTube. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
Yeah, if we know 10 more people listen to this, I will personally buy you a deep dish pizza in Chicago if you're going to the conference. So get that word out there. It means the world to us. And honestly, that's the best way. If you want to help us out, that's the best way you can. So if you are listening right now, make sure to join live 7:30 a.m. Central on YouTube. Follow Power BI Tips on any social media platform. If you are watching live, go, this is great, but I want to listen again, or listen to 132 other episodes. Subscribe on Apple and Spotify or anywhere podcasts are available.
Excellent. Thank you all, and we'll see you on Thursday.